I began looking at things like my father's photography, of course, but I started to collect old found 3D images. And the ones that I was most interested in were ones from around the time that my father had an amateur camera. That was the first time you could actually have an amateur stereo camera. You could send the film into Kodak and they'd send it back. And it was Kodachrome too. So there was this confluence between amateur use of stereo cameras and Kodachrome that, you know, it had a huge impact on me to see these photos, because each one of them seemed like a complete story in and of itself, and I would travel to that place, into that person's family or whatever. So I have a huge collection of found 3D photos. About 15 years ago, I decided to teach myself how to be a stereoscopic photographer. I wasn't a photographer before that. You know, someone that had studied photography and kind of thought that stereoscopic was interesting. I learned photography because I wanted to do stereoscopic photography. At the same time that I was collecting found photos, I was also collecting old toys that I found at flea markets and things. And I came across this doll named Henry. Henry's in his bubble wrap trailer. But this is the original Henry. And he was in a cupboard in my house with a bunch of other toys. And he's just kind of, every time I'd open the cupboard, staring at me, saying like, "Don't you see it? I mean, you know, I'm your guy here." I was leading kind of a double life as I was learning the photography, and I've been an environmental activist, or, you know, trained irritant really, for about 30 years of my life until about 6 months ago. I ran Greenpeace in the United States, and I ran the Turner Foundation here, and I felt it was becoming a little bit unimaginative, not that creative. I didn't like being part of the industrial negotiating complex. I thought that we had serious problems, and I really began to think about this project as a way to kind of get beyond that and maybe kind of look in a different way at, you know, things that I cared about. So, but Henry had this expression that I could kind of relate to, that I thought he was the right guy for this journey.
Peter Bahouth, the artist who created all of the viewers and the maquettes and the playlist and everything, started with this idea about 8 years ago. He started playing with the idea of the character of Henry. It's to me, it's a kind of a heroic creation story about a little boy who decides to try to find an alternate universe in a better place for himself and for the world.
About 6 months ago, or 7 months ago maybe, I started to think, you know, I'd really like to do something that was in tribute to Florence Thomas's work, and I would really like to take on the issue of thinking about space and what it means to us.
It's interesting, I think I'd approach in quite different terms, thinking that this is actually a very canonical historical hero, the kind of eternally adolescent man confronting his environment alone and in solitude. I mean, that's like Goethe, and that's, you know, this kind of like late 19th century German man on the mountain, even like a Zarathustra kind of thing. And it is something that happens without women. And it's a really recursive image. The Little Prince by Saint-Exupéry, Caspar David Friedrich's paintings. It's a solitary person in this immersive landscape.
That there is something still, like, you can't reproduce that experience of looking through the viewfinders. And so to me, like, there was something, I was making a jump between that and Ad Reinhardt, and somehow being, even though it is photographic, it still runs counter to being photographed in a way that I find very interesting. So I was entering it not from the narrative point of view, but really from the experience of perception that this seems to constantly reassert as you move around the show.
Because being unphotographable means it's unshareable.
Right.
So that's back to the solitary aspect of the approach to the work, and that's why you can't look at it at the same time as your friend, because you can only have one person at the viewfinder at a time, otherwise you don't get the experience.
I love that you're both like a spectator and a participant, because you're looking through these viewfinders, and it's transformative and transportational. Is that a word? You're the fact checker here.
That is a word.
Good. So, like for me in storytelling, I like looking through the lens of history, and I felt like that's what I was doing here. And when I saw this exhibit, which I love, I knew that I was experiencing a moment. And even though I'm not a kid from the 1950s, because it's a toy and because of the strong icons of that era, I felt like I was being transported back to a childhood that I didn't even have.
The report from Lima, where they were developing the new climate action that they're going to propose for Paris for 2015, they had all these rules, and then they said, well, everybody can just kind of do their own thing. So every country can do their own thing, and yeah, well, that is not going to stop what's going on, but that's okay. So there's no, I think that this exhibition really kind of wakes you up to that.
And I don't know how the rest of you all feel, but it kind of puts a little bit of anxiety into the equation, because it's like, then you have to stand up and say something. And what happens then? There are consequences to that.
Yeah.
I'm going to describe my anxiety. It was a little different. When I came in yesterday to see the show, I saw the robot that's behind me, and I was looking at all the viewfinders lined up, which they're all a little different. They're not the same, but they're really anthropomorphic with the two eyes, and they're kind of leaning in, and like they seem like mechanical approximations of the human body in some way. And so in order for me, especially having seen this first, in order for me to look at the show, it's like I had to get really close. Like I'm about to kiss the robot face or whatever. And there's a whole row of them, like it's a wedding procession. So, you know, I'm not looking through the viewfinders and seeing the scenes and the dioramas and so forth. I mean, it's all sort of impressively constructed. But what's interesting about it isn't that it's somewhere else, that it's like something physical right here, you know, that's been made, like I'm able to see its strangeness in a new way. I don't feel like transported. I feel like I'm given this strange lens into what's happening right now, and I just get to sort of pretend like it's a fantasy, but actually it's all pretty real.
Peter might not like this, what I'm about to suggest, but I think that there's a school of thought that thinks technology is here, but the real nature of man is here somehow, but kind of think as a species we're defined by our connection to technology, right? So all of these things kind of can't be disentwined. There is no back to the earth for man.
Yeah. He's coming in looking like Jacques Cousteau tonight, which I also like.
Oh, me? Oh, yeah.
Well, maybe Peter brought a bunch of individual viewers, if...
Yeah, I wanted to, I talked a little bit about learning the history, and show and tell is always good for me because it means that, you're entertained rather than listening to me talk. So I brought a lot of those, I brought viewers with those photos that I found. You're either going to see one of my father's photos from my family, or one of the found photos that I talked about, or one of my photos, the kind of work I was doing before I did this project. I also want to recognize Nikki Stars, who is in the back because she was my collaborator on the sets. One of the things where the planets lined up on this project, meeting Nikki, was kind of like meeting Henry in a lot of ways, and just really appreciate all the work. It was, I drove her absolutely insane. I became untethered, unreasonable, and crazy. So Henry decided before he left to make a mixtape that he brought with him. So the beginning of it is about love and loss, and the pain that he feels about separating himself, and the pain he feels that is causing him to have to look elsewhere.
Download this on the Hagedorn website?
Geez, I wish. I don't know how you do that, but the first part is about, him leaving and the loss that he feels, and love. He feels love. And the second part is kind of a journey, and then, there's an optimistic part. I'd say that if Henry had a motto, it would be, there is no hope, but I might be wrong.
Are we in the press conference mode?
Yes.
Okay.
Like, I just missed the time when kids had to crawl under their desks to imagine there was a nuclear attack.
I do.
But I see it's very much part of your work. So I wonder if you'd talk about that.
Well, Zoomer, I also had Zoomer in my toy collection, and Zoomer was the first robot to come out of Japan after the war. A lot of Japanese munitions manufacturers began making toys for children, and Zoomer was one of the first ones to come out. Runs on a C-cell battery. And when I began to think about the last place he goes, and if he meets somebody, who would that be and what, you know? Would it be, you know, a mate? Would it, you know, be a fish? Would it be some monster that Nikki drew or something? You know, I didn't know. But then it came to me, it's really Zoomer. And the reason it was Zoomer is because in science fiction, machines are either our slaves or they smart enough to dominate us and they turn on us. And I just thought that binary choice could be flipped around a little bit. So it's a little bit about how we see others and whether we accept them and whether we see them as lower than us or above us. So I wanted there to be someone that could kind of, we could think of as equals but different. And so I went with the machine.
I think we romanticize the abandonment of the planet all the time. And right now, it's kind of the easy fantasy is to just get the hell out of Dodge. It's obviously crashing.
Yeah, I don't support leaving the planet. You know, I don't support SpaceX and those things. I don't support the idea of trying to find another place for humans to go. I'm not into that.
For the record, I stay inside the perimeter.
I hardly leave my driveway. That's really where that kind of came from. And, you know, also the fact that he came out of a former munitions manufacturer, and, you know, came out of a different universe, right? People changed their world, you know, when they went from making bullets to making toys for children, I think. I think about that process a lot when I think about my toy collection, you know? Just the difference of doing that, you know, and that's kind of what this is about, you know? I mean, I've changed, you know, we've all changed a lot of things in our lives by kind of imagining a different place. And what the risk is in going there, and what you have to build to get there, and what you have to, you know, lose, right?
And when I was looking at this work, and especially these two photographs here, because I've been staring at them for the last hour.
They're staring at you.
They are staring at me.
Yeah.
That there's an equality that happens with these two pictures here, and you know, but the struggling that happens to a man-made thing, which has man-made problems, and trying to move beyond that to sort of talk about humanity as opposed to, you know, what its function is.
So, but their expression to me is that kind of astonishment that dream that everybody kind of bought into. It's like we're finally realizing that it didn't happen.
You know, there's this push and pull with that iconography because it's meant to be very bold and, you know, strong, and yet it's ridiculous. You know, it's racist and it's colonialists. And but, you know, for some reason the graphics kind of work for me with this story. I don't know why.
Isn't like your work kind of thematically looking back into the past and then finding out ways to recreate it in a contemporary manner?
Yeah. Yeah. That was a big mistake when I did the pinup show. But yes.
From what I saw, it looked great.
The element of the red planet and seeing the vellum, the red vellum, when, you know, on the windows, and as you come up and the light through it, reminds me of rose-colored glasses. So,
You know, it doesn't matter how much you convince older people that the environment is going bad, but it's really important to think about younger people. And as someone who felt like I was going to change the world watching all these movies in the 60s, I think there's something that speaks more to this as sort of an optimistic piece.
I mean, I am kind of an analog guy, and I think it's because, well, for example, I was thinking about it today, and I've had 6 1972 cars, and I still use film. You know, I can't show that in a, you know, it's not, I can't put it out there in a magazine. I can't put it social media really in the same way. That also because I drove by a car today that had a 8-foot tower on the top of it with like a radar cone, you know? And, you know, my cars generally tell me if I have gas and how fast I'm going. I don't know what that thing was doing. Or I drive by a van with 8 people in it and every single person is on their phone. I keep painting myself into a smaller and smaller, less populated corner as I do that. But for some reason it means something to me. I don't know why. I started to think about the term evolutionary emergency, right? And I thought about, what if elephants, knowing that they were hunted for their tusks, in one generation stopped growing tusks, evolved that fast. And I started to think, given kind of where we are and what I know about, the future under the big one, which is climate change, it changes everything. How do we evolve, not physically, but mentally, in a way that, helps us to survive? Because monkeying around with it, is not seeming to solve things. So, I began to just kind of think about looking up and what that means, and thinking about other artists that looked at space as a place to, think about utopian principles, for example. And I don't know what's left to try to apply utopian principles right now other than the unknown. And so it made sense that Henry would kind of look up and think of a different universe for himself and for, people that he loved, really. I mean, he's a very heartbroken boy. It's not like he wants, it's not like he wants to leave. There's a lot of loss that he feels and a lot of love that he feels.
Do you know how many people have signed up to buy a one-way ticket to Mars?
No, but I own a star.
That's cool.